Hello everyone, and welcome to a One Control Port Pickups video. I'm Benjamin Yoder with OneControlPort.com here today to talk to you about some recent games I've gotten. Mostly imports, and actually most of them are from Japan Retro Direct specifically. So if you don't know, Vink, who I did a podcast with in the past, he runs a website called Japan Retro Direct, and you can do a lot of like import games from there. Generally pretty cheap. I personally find the service to be pretty cheap overall. And why I like to I like to recommend it all the time. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but I've always had really good experiences working with Vink overall, and can highly recommend using his website. But anyways, so this is going to be a little different from the usual pickup videos. The reason being is I had some audio issues when recording the initial pickup video, so doing it at my desk makes the most sense right now. I will be cutting in some footage of when I was looking at that in the old format, so you can kind of get a closer look at the actual games that I picked up. And then obviously I'll be cutting in some gameplay too as I talk about the games themselves. So yeah, just to go ahead and get started here, pretty much everything here today is from Vink, with the exception of, or Japan Retro Direct, with the exception of two pieces of hardware that I purchased. So I'll note what those are, because there actually was an issue with one of those pieces of hardware that I got. I don't want that to reflect on Japan Retro Direct or anything like that. So first, let's talk about some Wii games though I got. So I picked up a couple of anime-based Wii games. One being Soul Eater. I believe it's called Monotone Princess, if I recall correctly. And actually, one thing I do want to show you is in the manual art itself, there's like this really cute, like bottom border here. It's like these, I don't know what these are. They're not really, they kind of look like little telephone poles or something at the bottom of the manual. And then the disc itself is also pretty cute too. It looks like kind of like a pumpkin or something. I don't know what do you call it? The Soul Eater logo, I guess. But yeah, so this is a kind of an interesting game. I don't know if I would say interesting, but there are things about this game that I think are worth talking about. One is when it comes to the game's combat, it's pretty straightforward combo-focused action game where you're just kind of pressing the A button and the character does like a set combo. And there's also some waggle controls, so when you waggle, it will kind of change what that combo does. So you can do like more of an AoE-based combo, or one that, just kind of does more melee damage on the person in front of you kind of thing. There's not really a lot of depth when it comes to that, but there's actually this kind of sliding system that's in the game. It's basically like a dodge left and right, and you just waggle the Wii remote or nunchuck to slide the character left or right. And when you're not actively in a combo, it just kind of acts as a dodge, but it's a pretty hefty slide, so you can do quite a bit in terms of movement and moving around the environment with it. But you can also use the slide like mid combo at certain points, so it creates this kind of interesting dynamic where when you're in the combo, you can kind of slide into another enemy and kind of start meleeing them that way. You can also do this on some of the larger bosses where you, in the middle of the combo, you kind of slide to the left, and so while you're still kind of attacking the boss, you're already kind of dodging out of their way to try to not get hit by their attacks. And it's a neat mechanic, although the game never really asks for you to use it, and I don't really know if they intended for you to use it this way, to be honest. There's like a lot of times where it doesn't really combo super well, so you'll slide, but you just slide so far out that you usually wouldn't end up hitting another enemy. But if you get it working correctly, you can do some really, I don't want to say interesting things with it, but there's like the potential for there to be interesting things, right? And I've only played these games for about an hour, majority of them at least, and it's just, it just doesn't really show what they want you to do with the combo in that, or the combat in that short period of time. I get the impression, given this is an anime game and the fact that the controls seem incredibly simple, that there's actually not going to be a lot to this game overall, and I'm probably looking for depth where there's no depth, basically. But I think that's kind of an interesting little bit here in the game. What I think is probably most worth talking about here is the game's presentation, where, I feel like anime games are kind of hit and miss. Some games do a really good job of kind of translating some of the presentational values of the anime into the game itself, and other ones just kind of do a slapdash job of throwing character portraits in, having some dialogue, and then, hey, we have a video game, guys. But Soul Eater really feels like a game that goes out of its way to do more. It just has a lot of unique kind of character animations when you're having the portraits talking on screen. There's like this one scene where one of the teachers like rolls out on a on a like office chair as he's leaving the conversation kind of thing. And there's also kind of like distance in certain character portraits. So if a character's further away, they'll kind of put the character further back. You know, it's very slight stuff, but it just kind of shows that attention to detail, and it's doing it enough that it feels very attentive to you know what the player is seeing and how they convey that information with a fairly low budget. There's also a bunch of animation at the beginning of this game. I don't know how much animation there is in this game, and if this is unique animation or maybe this is just retelling some storyline from the anime. I don't know anything about the Soul Eater anime. It's like, hey, you know that Shaman King video where I'm like, hey dudes, I guess there's ghost people? That's basically how I feel about Soul Eater. I'm like, I don't know. I figured out like 30 minutes into this game that some of the people are weapons, I guess. There's like 2 cowgirls and they turn into pistols for one of the characters. So I don't know, but it kind of caught my eye, and apparently this game's getting a fan translation, so this is something I might end up coming back to at some point and checking out, just because I did kind of find it really entertaining just to look at when it came to presentational aspects. Tons of voice acting in the game and things like that too. So if that fan translation finished, we'll take a look at it maybe. I think it's at like 80% right now, but you know, given it's a fan translation, how quickly that's going to get finished is a whole other thing. You know, people are volunteering their time to do this, right? So we'll see, but it's an interesting little thing. I got another Wii game that is also based off an anime. I need to read the case on this one. Magister Negi Magi Neopactico Fight. And when I imported this game, I kind of felt like this was going to be maybe the most accessible game that I picked up when I imported it, because it basically kind of looks like, and I don't think, let me see, I don't think there's anything interesting about the manual or anything. Oh, the only thing that was really interesting is, and you can't really see this on screen, but there's like a warning label in here of a guy getting like his face smacked with the Wii remote, and the guy smacking his face with the Wii remote is just like so happy while he's doing it, and I love it. But I think that's the only thing that really stood out to me about the packaging itself. Also, the disc has like this weird, not really weird, but it's like a peachish color that I really enjoy as well. So it's kind of a nice thing. But yeah, it's kind of like an arena fighter that's somewhat Mario Party-ish, where essentially you have 4 players in an arena, and you go around, you just kind of smack each other, and eventually, after a certain period of time, a mini game will initiate where the characters will need to like collect coins, break these little statues. Trying to think if there's anything else, but there were not a lot of them, and I would not say any of them were particularly engaging or anything like that. But basically, you can beat these mini games, and then if I think if the round timer runs out, you essentially, whoever has the most wins is the person who wins, or if you kill all the other players, then you'll win if that way as well. So I thought the concept was pretty interesting, but in execution, I didn't love it. It's just a very, I don't know how to put it. It's a very chunky game. It doesn't feel good to play. Like if you're coming into this expecting something to feel like a Power Stone or something like that, it's not really that. There's like the ability to like, I think there's like 2 different types of attacks you can use, but they're usually not very comboable. You just kind of knock the other player away, so you don't do a lot of damage. And you do have the ability to like pick up these cards that make your character transform, but you have to like waggle the Wii remote to make them transform, and then press the A button, I think, after that. And it's just like the motions you're doing and the actions you have to do to initiate these attacks just don't feel particularly natural, and I feel like there's kind of a delay on when the game will recognize when you're doing motion. And that just kind of, I think, makes it not feel great, unfortunately. So, you know, I don't know anything about this anime or whatever, but I thought the concept was pretty cool. But when I actually sat down to play it, I was like, you know what, this could be better. You know, admittedly, you know, this is a party game, right? So this is something that you want to play with other people, and I'm definitely not playing this with anybody at the moment, at least. Or at least I don't know anybody who would play this with me at the moment. So yeah, the other thing is that like, you know, in comparison to like Soul Eater, which I just talked about, when it comes to the story stuff, this very much feels like, hey, we just plastered some character portraits on screen, and we're like, here we go, now the characters are gonna talk. There's some nice things that look cute. Like I like that when you you select these sub characters that have different, I don't know if they're like buffs or power-ups or things like that. I mean, it's all in Japanese, I can't read Japanese, but There's like these little like character portraits that kind of go back and forth of these like chibi characters that are cute. So there's cute presentational elements here for sure, but it just doesn't feel like they put in the effort to make something that felt very dynamic in the storytelling. You just kind of have two people talking to each other, and that's kind of it. So I don't know if I'll ever get around to touching this one again. It's made by Shade, who made Gun Pixies, so you know I'm kind of interested in that regard, just because I think Gun Pixies is a really interesting game, and I also think what was that game called? Onslaught for the WiiWare. That was also done by Shade. I think that's an interesting game. But when I just like look at the elements of this game and what it's doing, none of them really stand out. There's also not like a lot of like arena variety as far as I can tell either. I think there's only maybe like 5 or 6 arenas, at least, that I could tell at the start of the game. Maybe unlock more later on down the road. But yeah, I don't know. This one seemed kind of a dud, to be honest with you. So it's in like the case itself though, great condition. So like that's the good thing about importing Japanese games. Like, hey, if you want good quality physical games, importing is good for you. But those games may not actually be good. I also picked up 2 DS games. One was one I've been keeping I haven't really been keeping an eye on it, but it's something I've been interested in for a long time, and that's Blood of Bahamut for the Nintendo DS. And this is actually a Square Enix game that was kind of around the time that there was a lot of attempts to kind of, I don't know what to say, like clone Monster Hunter games, but you had a lot of games kind of you know, taking inspiration for the Monster Hunter structure and doing like these kind of like mission-based things where you're fighting these like large monsters. Remember people also like comparing it to like Shadow of the Colossus as well. And you know, it's an interesting one. It's kind of, I'm not sure how to put it. It's a touchscreen focused action game, so you can play the game entirely with the touchscreen, or you kind of have to. Well, you can use the D-pad to like move around and use the L trigger to like dash, but you can also completely move your character around using the touchscreen itself. And so when you're attacking enemies, you're just like tapping on them, and then as you like tap on different enemies, it like creates combos. It feels kind of awkward. It doesn't feel super well executed. You also have like these special skills where you can basically select a button at the bottom of the screen to initiate the skill, and then once you select that, the character will do like some kind of dash attack, or if it's like a buff, they'll start casting a buff on themselves, things like that. So it feels a little awkward. I think a lot of the user interface elements just feel very small, and so when you're in a when you're in a predicament, when you're trying to attack enemies, it can be challenging to like reliably trigger those skills essentially. But overall, I think the style and feel of this game are really cool. The kind of the core concept is that you're fighting these giant monsters that are off in the distance, and there's like a variety of like little like cannons and stuff on the map that you can kind of use to shoot at them, and then they'll kind of get closer. And when they get closer, you can sit there and start like whacking them. You don't have to necessarily be on top of them to whack them. Like you can start slashing them with the sword when they're actually pretty far away from you, but it's considered a melee attack. But every character also, or all the characters I played at least, had all like the ability to like shoot a laser beam as well. And when you shoot that laser beam, it kind of go off and hit the enemy, and you're kind of hitting like the weak points on those enemies, and sometimes you have to break open parts of their body to reveal those weak points. So it's an interesting game. You can select between, I think it's like 6 or 8 characters, and they all have different like strengths. Visually, it reminds me a lot of like Xenogears in a lot of ways, because it's like 2D character 2D character sprites running around a 3D environment. And the music, I was playing this game, and I was like, holy crap, this sounds like Final Fantasy XI music. And sure enough, it is one of the composers who worked on Final Fantasy XI. He's like, this music just sounds ripped right out of Final Fantasy XI. So I went and looked it up, and it's like, oh, yep, that's a Final Fantasy XI dude. So this game seems really cool, and I wasn't expecting it to be so interesting from a control standpoint. Whether that's going to make a better game is kind of a whole other thing. And, you know, given that this is a multiplayer-focused game, I'm not sure how it's going to play in a single-player environment. If you look at the case, there's no Nintendo Wi-Fi logo or anything on there, so this was a local wireless only, which might be why, you know, this game did not get localized. You know, in America, trying to do local wireless people was a challenge, right? Because we're not Japan's everything crunched together, so people can go around and trade their Dragon Quest IX maps with each other. Where in the US, it's like you can play local Dragon Quest IX at PAX, and then otherwise, good luck, dude. You better find some other people to play it with you. So So yeah, I'm kind of not surprised it didn't get localized, but there is a fan translation for this, so I should note that. So if you want to play Blood of Bahamut, you can do that. I have not played the whole game, so I don't know if it's like a complete translation, but from the beginning of the game, from what I saw, everything looked complete, and I think the translation quality was overall pretty good. I didn't notice any like typos. Nothing really sounded that awkward. It seemed like a pretty professional translation for the most part. I got another Nintendo DS game, and this one's kind of a weird one. This is Breath for Nintendo DS. Actually, it's, nope, that's a bunch of kanji. It's Breath : something, but there's a bunch of kanji, so I'm gonna not even try. And Breath is kind of interesting. Also, this game comes with one of these little cards. They're like little cards that have promos for other games, and I love these things because sometimes you see games in there, like, especially a library like the Nintendo DS, where it's like, who the heck knows what came out of this console as a whole? Like, I don't think anybody has a complete grasp of what came out on Nintendo DS. But there's just like a lot of things in here, like Crimson Room. I don't know what that is. There's this other like weird, I don't know what this is either. It's like, it almost looks like a Harvest Moon style game, but it's got a really nice art style. I might need to look into that one later. But yeah, it's just, I love these little kind of cards. Anyways, Breath. This is a video game. Oh, and one other kind of fun thing is that if you look at the box of Breath, on the front side, you have the lady on the front with the pink hair, and on the back side, you get the lady on the back with the blonde hair, and they're like back to back. That was kind of a fun thing. Anyways, this video game. This video game is a visual novel, so, you know, being a Japanese visual novel, I, as somebody who cannot read Japanese, is fully prepared to basically throw this on my shelf and never look at it again. But I played probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours of it. That feels about right in terms of how long I played it. And it's interesting because it is a DS visual novel that's focused around using the microphone in some very gimmicky ways, right? It does not really integrate them in a way that feels particularly natural, but there are just like some weird things where like suddenly you need to blow a horn at some point. It's like, okay, and then you blow your horn. There's like things where like there's like a flower petal on the girl's shoulder, so you gotta blow that off her shoulder. Or then you can also choose to be the skeevy pervert and go ahead and blow her skirt instead, and then she gets mad at you and hits you. There's a lot of art in this game of her hitting you, so they give you the opportunity to do that. I think there might be some maybe some different things you need to do with the microphone, because there was some case where you know, I saved at one point and then loaded and then like chose each selection at a point, and every time it asked me to use the microphone, and all 3 instances she smacked me. So maybe I need to do something with the microphone to make it, you know, not like maybe I need to do like a shorter blow or a longer blow, or maybe I have to say something specifically like in a Love Plus situation. But it seems pretty interesting overall. There's also like mini games as well. I only came across one of these in the time I played it, but basically there's like this mini game where you're chasing after a car. Basically the story of this game is basically like this girl, I believe she's like wanted by this group of people basically for some reason. I don't know why. And so you're like, you know, have her in your house, or you're at her house, I don't know what it is, or you're in some building living together, it seems like. But there's one scene where these 3 guys in suits show up, and I think they take her essentially, and they are driving off there. So you're chasing after the car, and like the door of the car is like open and hanging out, and there's a bunch of people in your way. So how you get past them is you have to blow a whistle, and as you're blowing the whistle, the people like get out of the crowd. And then there's sometimes kids that are in the way, and if you're just like continuously blowing the whistle, they won't get out of the way. But if you like stop blowing, then blow again, then they're like, and they fall over and roll off the screen. So it's it's pretty like gimmicky stuff like that. That's kind of silly, and you know, as somebody who doesn't, you know any Japanese, it's kind of like exciting to have like this little point of interaction here and there. I will say I have a lot of patience when it comes to these kind of games though, and I did spend a lot of time just kind of trying to work out what was happening. You know, I didn't get a ton of information. That's kind of the thing with these visual novels, is like I can kind of stare at the screen and kind of try to figure it out, but it's pretty rough at times. But I did enjoy it, and I honestly think that, you know, if I wasn't already doing a bunch of other stuff right now, I might have sat down with this one all the way through, and just like, even if it's like a single playthrough, just to kind of see what the game had to offer on the way through. But yeah, it was kind of interesting. The one thing I'll have, and this is kind of goes back to like the Neo Magister Negi Magi, that whatever that anime is, kind of goes back to that thing where I said like the Wii remotes were not super responsive. and sometimes in Breath, like the microphone doesn't feel particularly responsive. So like, say for example, you're blowing the flower petal off her shoulder, right? It'll ask you to do that. You blow into the microphone, and then there's just like this second delay that is just really awkward. You're like, I don't know if this worked. I don't know if this is triggering something, and then the flower petal will blow off. So it's just kind of, yeah, it's just not really responsive in a way that you want to make it feel like a natural thing. Like you would, when you're doing a gimmick like this, you want it to feel like your breath is blowing that flower petal off, and it's not just you essentially triggering an event, right? That's what's important with these kind of things, in my opinion. And this game does not really do that super well outside of the minigames. The minigames are responsive, but during the visual novel sections, I think you really need it to be like your breath is pushing that flower petal off her shoulder. It sounds like a really silly thing, right? But if you're gonna go for a gimmick like this, that's kind of my expectation. It's part of why I had like such problems with Centrifugal Reflections, which we'll get back to at some point. I need to work on something for that at some point. So, anyways, that's it for the Nintendo stuff, I think. Actually, I have one other Nintendo thing we'll come back to later, but I won't do that right now. The next thing I want to start working on are PlayStation titles. So I got two PlayStation games here. This one, I don't know the full name of this one, actually, but it's basically a Picross game. And if you don't know what Picross is, it's basically like a puzzle game where you, like, have this chart. I don't remember if there's anything nice in the manual here or something. Let me open this manual up here real quick. Oh yeah, there's like a bunch of like really cute animal art in here. I think these are like some of these characters are like Sunsoft characters. So let me see if I can find them real quick. But there's that one game. I think it's called like Euphoria on the NES, or at least I think the US release. So I think this guy's from Euphoria. I could be wrong. I could be misremembering. But anyways, so manual art aside, this is a Picross game where you essentially do Picross. If you don't know what that is, essentially it's a board you have with a grid board you have essentially, and there are numbers on the left side and the top side of the grid, and the numbers listed there tell you how many of the grid slots need to be filled with like an X or something, and then how they break up those numbers will show you how those grid slots are filled in. So if you see like a 2 and a 7, then you know you have to find a group of 2 dots, and then you find another group of 7 dots in that row or that column, and essentially use all those different grid spots to make determinations on where these could be located. And that's kind of the basic idea of it, and this game is very much just that. But on the PlayStation, you can find this on, I feel like most consoles you can find some version of Picross. But yeah, and it's fun, it's good, I enjoyed it. You know, this game's in Japanese, so there is like this menu where you can kind of like sort through some options, and I don't know what they all do. I know one of them was like you could kind of save the board in certain states. So say for example you're gonna make a guess at what an row might be, you can save your board state, and then if you do it and it doesn't work out and you don't get the correct answer, then you can kind of load that old board state again. So that was one of the options. I didn't mess around with the other options on the screen, so maybe this game has some more features and functionality. But I believe the grid size goes from like 5 to 25, and the 25 on the PlayStation, using like the resolution of the PlayStation, is pretty blurry. I think it works well enough. You can see perfectly fine. But one thing that I would be worried about actually is, so this game actually supports the PlayStation Mouse, and I do not have a PlayStation Mouse. I looked into the cost of a PlayStation Mouse, and it was a bit more than I was willing to spend on one, or at least, look, we'll get into a conversation about mice here in a little bit, but that particular, after some other mice purchases I made, I was like, maybe let's not spend like $50 to $70 on a PlayStation Mouse right now. And I feel like the mouse would just be kind of get in the way of this game. I feel like the D-pad is kind of the best way to kind of navigate these little grids and kind of fill them in personally. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe a mouse makes it all so much better, but who can say? I've only ever played Picross on the 3DS, and specifically the Twilight Princess Picross that came with as a My Nintendo reward. So I don't have a lot of experience with those kind of games. I don't know, maybe this game is like lacking in some way. But it seemed perfectly fine. I think the one thing is that, like, with Twilight Princess Picross, it's kind of about, making characters related to the Zelda series. I'd imagine other Picross games, you're making other things. Like, I think Picross 3D, like the box always showed like the dog that you're making or something like that. And so this is like making little like Sunsoft character sprites, I think. So if you're like familiar with the Sunsoft series, I'm sure you'll get something out of that, or Sunsoft Sunsoft Games, I should say, not Sunsoft Series. So yeah, that's something. So speaking of mice, I went ahead and got, and so this is what I did not get from Japan Retro Direct, and this is the mouse for a game called Bikuri Mouse, which I think is like Surprise Mouse or something like that. And this is just a USB mouse, honestly, more than anything. I'll tell you why in a little bit that I got this. But it's basically a mouse specifically for a PS2 game called Bikuri Mouse. And this is an interesting game, but first I want to show you the manual itself, because the manual in this thing is really interesting. So basically, well, maybe not super interesting, but it's got a nice presentation. Like, so you can see right here, the manual is not on its side. It comes down like here horizontally, and then as you flip it, you know, all the stuff is in here, you know, this way instead. But if you get to the individual canvases, so I guess I should explain, this is like a Mario Paint style game. So you have different canvases that you can kind of draw on, and each of these canvases have their own page with their own kind of art here. And I thought it was like a really nice presentation for these kind of things. It looked nice. But yeah, so essentially, you know, this is a Mario Paint style game, and so there's not a lot to it. You just kind of sit there and go to these different boards, and as you draw on them, you know, depending on the board, you get like different effects. So you get like one that's like an oil painting kind of thing, that's kind of like, you know, doing Japanese calligraphy, but you can draw whatever you want, obviously. And then there's like a more electronic one. Apparently this game was made by the person who did Electroplankton, and so there's this very like Electroplankton style board you can draw on as well that kind of makes music. There's more of like a generic canvas, as well as some other gimmicky ones, and there's like a mini game that basically is the equivalent of that Mario Paint like fly swatter mini game where you're like bouncing the eggs based off these lines you draw. And yeah, it's just kind of like that weird mouse software suite. So I spent about 2 hours with it, and I was kind of like, okay, I'm kind of done with this. There's a lot of fun cutscenes. So every time you start a new canvas, it basically shows you a cutscene that plays, and it's kind of goofy. Some of the characters like are speaking in some weird tongue that's definitely not Japanese. It just sounds kind of like there's like this old man that's like at some point. It's like, oh my god, this old man. And yeah, it's just kind of a weird game. The one gimmick this game has that I feel like that, you know, makes it stand out from Mario Paint is that there are a lot of, well, it's not so much the gimmick itself that stands out, but how you interact with this gimmick. So there's a lot of like pre-made graphics you can put into place. So if you think of Mario Paint, you have like different stamps, different brush types you can make. So you can have like, you know, some kind of like the star from Mario, you can like draw using the star or something like that, right? In this case, how they handle that is you can like turn on a magic brush, and depending on the color of your brush and the shape that you draw, it will basically draw pre-drawn things. So you can like create trees, create bushes, create rocks, things like that. And so you can do a lot of these things with this brush where you're just creating all these different objects and things like that. And it's just not very intuitive because there's nothing in the game that really tells you what you need to draw to make what. So it's just a lot of experimentation, and there's a lot of options for these drawings, and a lot of colors, and a lot of shapes you can do. And it just doesn't really, like unless you memorized all these different shapes and colors and what they make, it'd be really hard to make something with it. And so, you know, where Mario Paint, you just look at the top of the screen, you click on and go, okay, there's my, I don't know, Game Boy, right? And here it's like, well, how do I draw a bamboo tree? Well, you have to draw, you take the, you know, I don't know, brush and circle it, and then there goes the bamboo tree. I don't know. Like, it's so hard to know how it works. And you know, some of them make sense. Like, you know, if you want a puddle of water or something, you draw a circle with the blue marker. But sometimes like you draw that, and then like a rock comes out of the center, and it's like not, like I don't know what determined whether a rock was in that water or not. So it's kind of weird stuff like that. But I do think it's a very quirky looking game, and I think it's fun visually. So if you're into like some weird, you know, weird PlayStation 2 games, there you go. You can do that, I guess. And then as in addition to the mouse, and I actually don't have the hardware with me right now, although I did have a recording of me with the hardware. I have the PCFX mouse. So this mouse was not particularly cheap. Here's the box for it that I have. I actually don't have any other PCFX packaging, so this is the first piece of PCFX hardware packaging I've gotten, and so I actually really like how it looks. It's got a nice presentation to it. The like PCFX logo like transforms in the corner. It kind of like eventually pops out of this little box kind of thing. It's kind of fun. But the mouse itself looks like a mouse. The unfortunate thing is when I got this mouse, and again, I did not get this from Japan Retro Direct, so this is not on him. It was from some random eBay seller. The mouse stopped working after like maybe a minute. The left click on it essentially stopped working. And the only game I had to really try it with at the time was First Kiss Story. So I kind of just poked around with it a little bit, and yeah, I didn't really get very far before it stopped working. So I have somebody who's working on it that's gonna see if they can fix it. So gonna see how that works out, and maybe it'll be okay. So I spent like after shipping and everything, it was like $90 or something like that for this. So it was not cheap, but thankfully the seller refunded me for it and didn't ask for it back. So you know, hopefully I got a deal here if we can get that thing fixed. So basically, the reason I bought this game is that I also went ahead and imported Farland Story FX, which if you don't know what this is like a very Fire Emblem style strategy RPG for the PCFX. And I want to show you something pretty cool about this manual. Kind of similar to the Breath, if I can get it out of here. Kind of similar to Breath is it has like kind of a back end that's kind of related to the cover. So in this case of this one, you can see you have the front here, and it's kind of barren, but it does extend. So you can see her hair come out the other side. There's just a big old field over there, but you know, they tried, right? And then, you know, this is like a full color manual. There's like these super cute little character, you know, chibi character arts in here. Maybe a little smaller, it'd been nice if they made them a little bigger. You know, they got quite a bit of extra real estate there. But they basically match the character sprites in the game, I believe. So yeah. But like I said earlier, this is a strategy RPG for the PCFX. So you essentially have these little soldiers, and you basically command them to kind of move around the field. And in the case of when I was playing it this time, I was using the PCFX gamepad, but you can see, as you can see on the screen here, there is mouse support. So my intention is once I get the mouse back, and if it's working, then I will, by myself, not with you. We're not streaming this. This is my game for me. We'll be playing some I'll be playing some Farland Story FX. And yeah, the game itself, you know, it's pretty straightforward. You know, if you're a lot of the stuff on the PCFX, it's like, this is interesting on the PCFX, but maybe if you were to bring it over to other platforms, it might not be super interesting. Depends on the game we're talking about. But in a game like Farland Story FX, which seems very much like a traditional strategy RPG, it's, at least so far, it's like any other strategy RPG on any other console. So the fact that it stands out mainly stands out by the fact it's on the PCFX versus anything special about it per se. Now, it does have a lot of FMV cutscenes as far as I can tell. Actually, I haven't played that much, so I don't really know how much there is. But it also has a lot of voice acting. So at the time, it probably would have been very, very unique, or maybe not very unique, but, you know, it would have had a higher presentation than, like, you know, if you're playing, you know, Fire Emblem on the Super Famicom, unless you, like, were using the Satella view, right, and getting that voice acting beamed to you over a satellite signal. You know, this game gives you some nice presentational things as well. So I played it for maybe like an hour, and the kind of a problem with this game, and I talked to one of my friends about it, and he seems to think that this is just kind of older strategy games in general. I really didn't play anything until like post 2003 probably when it comes to strategy RPGs. It's just very slow, and so doing like a map can take like an hour, and a lot of times it's just because you're just shuffling characters across a map, and it just takes forever. I can't tell if there's any kind of like weapon wheel system here in terms of Fire Emblem, so like, you know, sword beats axe, whatever. But each character seems to have like unique skills and things like that they can use. Or rather, maybe not so much unique skills as much as different weapon types they can equip. And then some characters like have a heal, where other characters have like a ranged attack, and other characters are like have close range damage and things like that. The one other thing that's kind of interesting about this game is when somebody dies, you know, I'm mostly speaking in the terms of like, you know, comparing it to Fire Emblem. When somebody dies, they just kind of go gray on the map, so their sprite just kind of stays there, and you can still have a healer come over and heal them, as far as I can tell. I don't know if it's like, hey, after 3 turns they're dead, but it seems like that they just kind of stick around, and you come over, heal them, and then kind of get them moving again. So I'm looking forward to playing more of this, but we'll do it after I get the mouse back, hopefully, and see how that goes. I'm hoping that maybe the mouse will make the map movement a little faster, because the mouse definitely moves around faster than like the, you know, using the D-pad with the cursor. This is kind of unrelated, and this is also something I just kind of bought randomly from an eBay seller. I also got a Private Idol mouse pad. If you don't know what Private Idol is, it's a PC Engine CD game by Hunex. And yeah, it's a fun thing. I mentioned it once. I don't remember where I mentioned it on the website. I talked about it once on the website. I think it's because I was archiving the anime or something like that. Because I have two different versions of the anime. I have the PCFX version of the anime, and I also have the Windows 95 version of the anime. So I did a post on that. I think I talked about it a bit there, but yeah, that's a mouse pad because I have all these mice that I need to do, because if you didn't know, I usually use trackball mice. It's kind of hooked up right now, so I can't really show you, but I usually use trackball mice. So I don't really need mouse pads usually. So this is the first mouse pad I've had in years. And then finally I have, hopefully I haven't said finally this whole time. I remember the last video I said finally like 800 times. I also picked up this, Doraemon, manual. So, or not manual, strategy guide. So basically just a strategy guide with Doraemon, the 3 fairy stones, the Nintendo 64. The big thing about this is I was trying to see if there was more art of a character called Corona in this game. Because Corona is a character, as far as I can tell, is specific to this video game in the Doraemon series. And I like her design a lot. You know, she's very Carrie Fernandez-ish, like in Castlevania 64. I also just have this weird interest in like characters with blue hair. I don't know why. I'm just like, yeah, blue hair. It's like the same way I feel about like male characters with red hair who just have like that RGB, like 100% red hair color. It's like a nuclear red. And like, I also like characters like nuclear blue color. I was just like, yeah, turn that red slider all the way up and then put that on my anime man. In the case of blue, that's what I do for anime girls for some reason. So yeah, and you know, I didn't get a ton of colored Corona art at the very least. So if you look at the character page here, we do have some Corona. It's a very, stocky drawing of her, maybe the most stocky drawing of her in the whole thing. Otherwise though, I don't think there's any other colored Corona art in here. However, there is a, Doraemon manga in the back here that goes over the story of the game. And, you know, this game doesn't have a ton of story elements within the game itself. So that's actually kind of neat that they kind of flesh out the story in this. Again, I cannot read Japanese, so I cannot tell you if this is any good. But if you were like, hey man, Corona, I want to get some Corona lore, she is pretty much on every single page of this story. So if that's what you want, it's here. I would really like to get this scanned in a way, like professionally somehow. Like because it is a bound book, it's not easy for me to scan this without just like bending the pages essentially. And you know, I don't expect that if I get it scanned that I'll be able to salvage the book itself. I imagine the book itself would be destroyed. But I would like to do it right, I guess. If I'm going to destroy this strategy guide, I would like to do it right. So I either need to find some kind of good recommendation of how to do that and how to scan it properly, or rather how to cut it in the right way so I can scan it properly without damaging any of the pages to the extent that the scan would suffer. But also, yeah, just like trying to figure out just trying to figure that out. And maybe that means sending it off to someone else to do. Maybe it means me doing it. I don't know yet. It's not high priority right now. I don't think the Doraemon, the 3 Fairy Stones strategy guide is at risk of disappearing from this world. I'd imagine there's many copies of this. So you know, maybe if I find out, maybe if I'm the last person alive on Earth, I'll be like, oh no, I gotta go ahead and scan this. Anyways, that's it for this week. Thank you for coming. Like I said, a lot of this stuff came from Japan Retro Direct, specifically the software. Hardware stuff, not so much. But yeah, I just want to, I'm knocking this box over. So I just wanted to kind of go over some of that stuff. And, you know, if you haven't been to the Japan Retro Direct before, again, I would recommend it. I personally find their prices to be pretty reasonable for a lot of games. And sometimes, you know, when you're just like, hey, I bought this game that I really wanted, but sometimes you're just going to throw in a copy of PCFX Mouse because it's like $4 and it's like, why not? Because I'm going to be paying the same shipping either way. Anyways, that's it for this week. If you want to see, I also picked up some GameCube games recently, but I didn't do a pickups video because I had gotten actually quite a few. So I did a GameCube pickup stream. So if you want to see what those games are, you can go ahead and check those out. And then, yeah, and I think that's pretty much all I have to plug at this moment in relation to this stuff. So anyways, that's it. I hope you have a great week. OneControlPort.com is the website. Bye.